Hi, I'm Rod Suskin. Welcome to this special episode of Rod TV. I've brought you here with me deep into the rural Transkei, where I share a homestead with my husband, Chris Reid. We'll be talking to him later. Join me on this magical adventure. Getting there is a 1,300-kilometer journey from Cape Town by bus, by combi taxi and pickup van, and eventually by foot. From Umtata, the capital city of the Transkei area, the music in the taxi seemingly very appropriate. Pondoland is one of the oldest settled areas in South Africa, settled around the 6th century in an area where San and Khoi people already lived. These Nguni people settled, developed a culture independent of the Xhosa, who later settled below them, and the Zulu above them. Visited by Portuguese and British through the colonial years, absorbing such people into their tribe, as they are culturally known to be very welcoming and adaptable and absorb new things frequently. Only subjugated by the British in 1894 and forcefully incorporated into the Cape Colony and the Union of South Africa a few years later, and continue to be an independent, strong culture all the way up to modern times. I've been coming here frequently for near on 20 years, and in the last few years I have seen an enormous amount of development, road building, development of houses, of retail areas, retail centers, much bigger, wider roads, bringing new things to these hills and new settlements and bigger settlements. Certainly can see the area growing and seemingly becoming wealthier. As we get into the more rural areas, some things stay the same. You can see tin-roofed houses there. Those would have been thatch in the past. And that's the famous Executioner's Rock from which one of the Pondo kings would throw his rivals. As we cross the Mzimvubu River into eastern Pondoland and head towards the Lusikisiki area, which is near where our homestead is. And beyond those hills, really, is where we're headed to. People here still burn the grass at the end of every season to prepare for the next year. And traveling through Lusikisiki, the small town nearby, and getting further into a much more traditional Pondo culture. This area around Lusikisiki is more developed than I remember it being, but again, as we go further into the hills, we do see less and less of the modern houses, more and more of the wide open areas, and eventually into the small villages. We are headed to our first stop, which will be the village of Mzizangwa, where we will stay with our local family before we head deeper and further to our own homestead further into Pondoland the next day. Finally getting to the forests, there is still a lot of both eucalyptus forest planted here, non-indigenous and indigenous forest in this area. We eventually reach the homestead of Mama Mabala, our mother and overseer here in Pondoland, who lives in Mzizangwa village. And you can see again tanks, square houses, even she's beginning to modernize. We got stuck in the rain here. The rain came and stayed for 3 days. And so instead of trekking off to our homestead, we found ourselves sitting for 3 days in a hut. And with no distractions, computers and internets around us, It is the most relaxing experience to sit in a hut for 3 days watching the rain fall. Ask these sheep, who I'm not so sure felt the same about it. But eventually we can depart and begin our long walk down to our homestead, which is inaccessible by road. It's about an hour and a half's walk from the nearest road. Here we are, and our way is still stopped by cattle, giving me time to pause and notice these electric lines, which are also something new. Electricity has come along with the roads, and while it might be replacing some of the old traditional lifestyle, at the same time it is providing access to obviously telephones, internet, light and appliances in modern times, something that is essential for people to grow and prosper. Finally, the long-awaited long walk to our homestead begins, and through the forest, our first moment of pause is at the magnificent Magwa Falls, the 142-meter waterfall, one of many waterfalls we actually visit on this trip, that falls down into the Magwa ravine, continuing the Magwa River, which will eventually actually flow right past our homestead down at the bottom. You can see this any hundred of times, and it is as breathtaking every single time I see this. And finally, basically, to the edge of the cliff of the ravine down which we are going to walk, and from which you can actually see our homestead in the distance. That is our destination. The 4 blue houses you can see there. The walk down takes us through grass, it takes us through bush, it takes us through forest, and it takes us through rivers. And finally, when we cross the Magwa River at the bottom, we enter the forest that marks essentially the bottom of the garden. This is indigenous forest alongside the Magwa River that leads us to our homestead, which is a homestead on tribal land granted by the chiefs. But our journey here is to talk to Chris about what that really means and what it really is about. We're going to go down to the Magwa River to have a conversation and find out just what it means to be a white sangoma living in rural Pondoland today. I'm sitting here on a rock in the middle of the magnificent Magwa River, just a few hundred meters up the road from our homestead, and talking to my husband Chris about what it really means to live in an environment like this. Firstly, Chris, thanks for coming on the show and helping me out with this.
Pleasure.
So I'm sure a lot of people are wondering, how did you even come to be in this incredible but very wild place?
Well, it's quite a long story, but I'm a white sangoma trained in the Pondo tradition here in Pondoland, in a village called Mtambalala. I trained under a mentor, the clan of Tlamini, and I went into training in 1993 and finished in 1997. Over the time of my training, I got to meet a herbalist very famous herbalist who was the chief of this valley called Mdagan. And the homestead I stay in now belonged to his sixth wife, Mama Bala, who's now like my mum. And she moved up to Mzizangwa village after he died. And he asked her to leave me the homestead because he knew how much I loved this place.
So, but don't you have to get a homestead granted by a chief or something like that?
Well, he was a chief and there were witnesses when he asked her to leave it. But Mabala took me to the big chief and you had to go through the official process with all the elders and they gave me the land. They sent elders down to show me the boundaries and we made them kumboti and we had beer and brandy and cool drinks and things. And it was officially made mine. And then I called my ancestors to the homestead.
What do you mean, call your ancestors?
Well, I had a dream involving my mother about a cow on a beach that I recognized as a place called Manteko, which is not too far from here. And and it was a very specific looking cow and color. We found a cow that looked like the dream and we took it to the sea at Manteko with all the sangomas who came and we talked to the ancestors. The sea is the big house of the ancestors, where everybody's ancestors are. Because I'm not quite sure where my distant ancestry is. I just know that we're Scottish and British and Welsh and Irish, all mixed with Dutch. So we did that and we asked them to, here's the cow that I dreamed, and we're bringing this cow to bring them to the homestead and open the homestead. And that's what we did. And the big chief came down and many of the elders and the Kwele's older brother, who was one of the elders, he was here. And they officially handed the homestead over to me.
We came down, you mean that 2-hour climb down the ravine?
Yes. Well, for everybody here, that's completely normal. Everyone here is real fit.
So that is pretty remote, obviously. And that means you have no electricity and this is the only kind of water you have. So what do you do here? How do you do here?
Well, it's very much chop wood and carry water because we need to do that to keep the homestead going. Literally taking wood home to keep the home fires burning. And water and wood are part of everyday life, what we need just for the nuts and bolts of staying alive. And I'm surrounded by the most incredible chemists. Forests and swamps and grasslands around here are full of the hugest variety of different species of plants that we use as medicines. The nature here is incredible and very undisturbed. Still plenty of wildlife in the forest, and the bird life and insect life, everything. It's reptile life, plenty of snakes. But it's, for me, it just feels absolutely right to be living this close to nature. And as difficult as it is, for me, it's just really, really worth it.
So you do all those things, but what do you do as your living or as your day?
I consult with people mostly in Cape Town. I go there to earn money and to be with my husband. And so I consult and I treat people with medicines and I train people. I've had, including the current ones, 22 trainees. Wow. That's a lot. You share that period of their life and afterwards with them, and it's a family that just carries on growing. Our line of sangomas is renowned here in Pondoland, and each new trainee that comes in joins the family, and so they're coming faster than the old ones are departing.
What do the local people think of a white person coming and living in the traditional way?
They think it's absolutely amazing that there are white people who are keen to come and live this kind of a lifestyle. And we're agriculturalists. I farm. At my homestead, in the growing season, we grow maize, pumpkins, beans, vegetables. and in winter we just grow winter vegetables. And I keep livestock. I've got goats and cows and chickens. So to live this lifestyle and farm in the old way, where we plow with oxen, because you can't get a tractor down here or anything like that, and we hoe the garden by hand. They impressed and very pleased that white people are prepared to come and join in as part of the community and live here and make this a home.
So there are no racial issues. The whole country seems to be, at the moment, at each other's throats about culture and race.
Well, the thing is that here in the rural area, I've found far less racialism or even concern about me being white in a racial kind of way. Surprised because I'm white and I'm living amongst black people, yes. But not a racial issue at all. Very interested in our lives and the way we do things and what have you. But it's more about fascination than about racism.
And the traditional culture, the traditional lifestyle, is it alive? Is it changing, or has it died out? I mean, times have changed.
Yeah, in this very rural area, it's still very much alive, but it is changing. And we've got electricity and roads being built, which is making a huge difference.
But I mean, surely that's a good difference. You can't expect people to live in the Stone Age while the 21st century is going on.
Absolutely not. Dad. I can't go.
Yeah.
He's found some lost cows over here. That's fantastic that all these improvements in people's way of life are coming to the hills. For so long, people had to fetch wood and carry water, and that's what everybody did. But things are changing, and it's a good thing. It's making life easier for people. And in the old days, not all the children went to school. They looked after the herds of cows and goats and things like that, and the girls stayed to help in the fields. But now education, everybody's going to school. All the children are going to school. And so the pressure is off the adults who left at home without the children to help anymore. But there's electricity and roads. People are building less round houses and more flat-roofed houses with zinc roofs.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that. When we were at Mzizangwa village last week, someone told me that we're seeing less round houses and more square houses and tin roofs and so on. Isn't that the loss of the culture?
Well, I think that everybody, even if they build a whole modern homestead with flat roofs and tiled roofs or anything like that, they will always have a round house for the ancestors. Well, not always, but it definitely sangomas will. And that's an important thing to remember the old ways, even if you're living in a different way, not just forget. And this culture is one that has always adapted and absorbed pieces of other cultures that it's encountered. And a culture that adapts is one that survives.
And what about you? You're going to have electricity and roads down here?
Absolutely not. The chief, in fact, asked me if I'd like electricity here. And wanted to build a road that came in from a village called Butvele, across the Mzimhlaba River, having to build a bridge for me and everything. Just for me, I'm the only resident in this valley. But I chose to live here because it is in the old way. It's the way of the ancestors. And when I crush things on a rock or plow with the oxen, I feel inside me that I know that my ancestors did exactly that too, and that we lived in round houses and houses made of earth and grass. And for me, that's very important with training my students, that it's done in context. It makes it easier for them to connect with their ancestral spirits by having to live on a daily basis in the old practices and the old ways of living.
Right. I mean, even if people weren't Africans, back when everyone lived in earth houses and made fires
Exactly.
and collected wood and
Well, my
respected
ancestry
nature.
is largely Celtic, and I know that they had round houses, and I know that they crushed things with stones, and I know they ploughed with oxen. So there's a familiarity to it that feels right.
Another aspect of what's impacting the culture is outsiders coming in. And I know from things like government plans to build in the area to mining companies, how is that impacting this local area?
Well, look, there are very few job opportunities here, and it's quite a terrible thing for kids to go through school, which is difficult here, and to get an education and have no opportunity to go further to go and earn money other than to have to go to a city and take a chance of finding a job when you get there, which is not an easy thing. The jobs in this country are few and far between. So any kind of thing that was planned for here to develop and to provide job opportunities, I think it's a good thing within reason. I think that there should be a sympathy and an empathy of the incredible natural beauty here, and that the people who live here have always been part of this place, part of the land.
But it's under threat. So,
Well, it
so
is
what I
under
really
threat.
want to ask you about is what about outsiders coming in, like mining companies?
Well, mining companies, we've just had a recent thing that's ongoing at the moment. It's at a place called Kolobeni. And in Kolobeni, there's an Australian company that actually registered itself in China. Australia has very strict mining laws in their own country. And they go to third world countries and mine and basically abuse the place, taking the minerals and just leaving their mess behind. And that's what happened here. This Australian company got involved with corrupt government officials who gave them permission to mine for titanium in a very sensitive biome area, and that was a wetland. It is a wetland. And they moved in their machinery, they plowed a road through the forest, and had already done damage to the dune forest and the beach itself. By the time that the Queen of Pondoland, at that time, her son has now taken over, she heard about it and went on site and personally put a stop to it because nobody had informed her that this was going on in her place amongst her people. The village of Kolobeni, the villagers themselves, would have to be displaced and moved. And they resisted. And they went around them and falsified documents to help the mining go ahead and be approved. And it's caused huge tension amongst the communities that live at Kolobeni and fighting. And very recently, just about a month ago, the guy who was heading the opposition to the mining of the Kolobeni village was assassinated by people who want the mining to go through. And so I don't think that kind of industry for this place is a good idea, because it's damaging not only the environment, but the people themselves, and causing tensions that are unnecessary. The way I would like to see things done is that they do something that includes the people and the place, and some kind of ecotourism or something along those lines. I mean, I'm not really an expert in how to create industry in a place, but I think that improving roads and more schools and clinics and projects that people can do, agricultural projects, this kind of thing, that would be a good thing to have here and provide a certain amount of employment locally for the people. The tea estate, there's a beautiful tea estate, Magwa Tea Estate, up at the top of the cliffs, and they won the award for the best salon tea in the world in 2000, and it's an absolute wreck at the moment. It was taken over by government some years back, and well, money went astray and the people couldn't be paid for a very long time, and they endured it for months and months about 8 months, I think they didn't get paid. And then they rioted and they caused a big problem for the tea people by blocking the road and not allowing anybody through to go to a resort called Mboiki. And they wanted to be heard and to be listened to. And well, what's the end result is that they're running on quarter manpower on the tea estate. The tea, which is not enough to even maintain the tea properly, never mind produce tea. And there's no way that tea is going to win any awards soon unless a huge amount of money is put into it to restore it and re-employ people. It used to provide employment for a large portion of Pondoland. They all worked on the tea. They had a place to work. And that's now gone.
I mean, if we come here in 50 years' time, what are we going to see? Is there a wild Magua river like this? People managing to thrive, or what's happening?
Well, I think that all the villages are growing at an incredible rate. Plenty of building going on. So money is coming into the hills areas, but from people who are working outside of the hills in cities and so on, finding other job opportunities. But also learning skills which they're bringing back to the hills. And building skills, building really smart, modern homes. So the whole standard of living, I think, is edging up. And it's a very gradual thing. I think it'll be a few generations even before the playing field is being leveled.
Well, I know actually that you've written a couple of books for children, and you actually wrote one of them on the Kolobeni issue.
Yes, that's right. My first book I wrote was introducing the character and the place Pondoland and sangomas and traditional life and the nature here, natural history and that kind of thing. The second book starts to deal with current issues in Pondoland, and the second book was about Kolobeni. And the main character that I've created, it's a fantasy for teenage and adult people. In my book, they won and they stopped the mine. The mining's been put on pause at the moment, and it's still a possibility that it will go ahead.
So, it's still unfinished business. Is your book still available?
You can order physical books online. Or download it onto your Kindle.
So, what is your hope for Pondoland going forward?
My hope for Pondoland is that the younger generation modernizes and gets fantastic educations and goes out to taste the world that they've been deprived of for so long due to apartheid, and learns the downside of Western living and materialism. And I hope that maybe even their children will come back to the hills, and we'll still be able to hold the traditions and the customs to pass on to future generations.
So they'll have beautiful homes in lovely towns and villages, and every now and then come down the ravine to visit the old sangoma who still lives the old way.
No, I think that a lot of them will become disillusioned and come back to farm. That's what I'm hoping.
That sounds like a better future.
Yeah.
Baba abuyele kaya tung abuyele kaya tungulam sigolin abuyele kaya tungulam sigolin.
One can never be too long in the Transkei, but my beard has grown, and that's my last taxi waiting for me in the background there. So we'd better have to leave, as sad as that is. But it's been great sharing this with you. Hope you've enjoyed it. Sorry, no time for your questions. But remember, you can send your personal questions to be answered next week's episode. Questions about anything, questions about the Transkei, anything you like. And I'll see you back here, well, back in Cape Town and back on YouTube next week, Friday at noon. Cut.
Hello, Hari.
No, you can't do that. So let me ask you that question again. I think that's about it.
Are we done?
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's a wrap.
It's a wrap.